You've probably heard the names tossed around: beer, wine, whiskey, rum, gin, vodka, tequila, brandy. They sound familiar, don't they? All of them fall under one umbrella: alcoholic beverages. Yet, have you ever paused to ask what makes them different? Why does one drink feel lighter while another seems to knock you off your feet? It all comes down to how they're created and how much alcohol content each one carries. That's what we're going to unravel here. At the very heart of every alcoholic drink lies a simple yet fascinating process: fermentation. Picture yeast as a tiny living machine. Its job is to feed on sugars, and in doing so, it produces alcohol and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide escapes into the air, and what remains is a liquid transformed into alcohol. That's where the journey begins. Now, where does this sugar come from? The source can vary. Sometimes it's extracted from grains like barley or wheat. Other times, it comes from fruits, like the sweetness of grapes. Plants, too, can offer sugars that can be fermented. The ingredient chosen as the sugar base sets the tone for what kind of beverage you end up with. For example, grapes go through fermentation to become wine, while barley gives us beer. These drinks are called fermented beverages because fermentation is the only process they undergo. Fermented beverages don't usually carry very high alcohol levels. A glass of wine often falls in the range of 12 to 15% alcohol, while beer is usually much milder, anywhere between 4 to 6%. It's why beer feels lighter and wine delivers a moderate punch. If you ever want to know how strong a particular drink is, don't rely on guesswork. Simply look at the label. There's a small but important figure mentioned there: a BV, which stands for alcohol by volume. It tells you in clear numbers how much alcohol the liquid contains. But what if you're not in the mood for something mild? What if you're after a stronger kick? That's when we step into the world of distillation. To put it simply, distillation is the act of concentrating alcohol. Here's how it works. Once the liquid has been fermented, it's gently heated. Alcohol has a lower boiling point compared to water, meaning it turns into vapor at around 75 to 80 degrees Celsius, while water stays behind because it needs to reach 100 degrees to boil. This alcohol vapor is then collected, cooled down, and condensed back into liquid form. And just like that, you've created a beverage that's far more powerful than its fermented beginnings. This process gives rise to what are known as distilled beverages or spirits. Spirits are essentially concentrated alcohol drinks, and their strength depends on how many times the liquid has been distilled. The fascinating part is that the type of spirit you end up with isn't random. It depends on what raw material was chosen as the starting point for fermentation. Take sugarcane juice or molasses, for instance. Distill them, and you end up with rum, a drink rich with a sweet, robust character that many associate with the tropics. On the other hand, if you distill wine or other fruit-based liquids, you'll produce brandy. Grapes give us traditional brandy, while apples, cherries, and other fruits lead to variants that often carry the fruit's name, like apple brandy. Then comes whiskey, one of the most globally recognized spirits. Whiskey is made by fermenting a grain mash. Barley, corn, rye, and wheat can all play their part. Each grain imparts its own twist of flavor, giving rise to countless varieties. Scotch, for example, is a particular type of whiskey with its own set of traditions and standards rooted in Scotland. Every sip tells a story of how the grain was treated, distilled, and aged. Vodka, meanwhile, is often thought of as the cleanest and purest spirit. Traditionally crafted by distilling fermented grains or potatoes, it's also made from other starch-heavy plants like corn or rice. What makes vodka stand apart is its neutrality. It doesn't scream with flavor, but instead provides a smooth, subtle experience, which is why it blends so seamlessly into cocktails. Now, let's turn to gin. Unlike the others, gin carries a signature taste that's instantly recognizable. It begins like vodka, often distilled from grains like wheat or barley. But what sets it apart is its final touch. During the last stages of distillation, it's infused with botanicals, flavoring elements from plants. The star among these botanicals is the juniper berry. It gives gin that crisp, pine-like flavor that lingers on the palate. Some gins undergo multiple rounds of distillation, making them exceptionally pure and smooth, while locking in those botanical notes. And then there's tequila, born from the heart of Mexico. This spirit comes from the blue agave plant, a succulent with sharp leaves and a starchy core. When distilled, it produces a drink unlike any other, often sipped straight but just as frequently mixed into cocktails like margaritas. Its identity is so deeply tied to the region of tequila that it's protected by law. True tequila must come from specific areas in Mexico. There's one more fascinating category worth mentioning: liqueurs. These aren't created from scratch like the other spirits, but are instead a creative twist on them. Liqueurs start with a base spirit, vodka, rum, brandy, or anything else. And then layers of flavors are added through fruits, herbs, spices, and sugar. The result is a drink that can be sweet, fragrant, and colorful. They often find their way into desserts, after-dinner drinks, or vibrant cocktails. When you compare all of these spirits, their alcohol content varies widely. Most distilled beverages hover around 40 to 60% alcohol by volume, far stronger than beer or wine. Yet, the strength can be pushed even further through repeated distillation. This is how some of the world's most potent spirits are made. The Polish Polmos Spiritus Rectificowany, for instance, clocks in at a staggering 96% ABV, while Everclear sits close behind at 95%. These are not drinks for casual sipping, but stand as examples of just how concentrated alcohol can become. At the end of the day, whether it's the comforting sip of wine, the casual pint of beer, the smoky edge of whiskey, or the bright zest of tequila, every alcoholic beverage carries within it a journey of fermentation, of distillation, of history and culture. Each drink reflects the traditions of the region it comes from and the ingenuity of those who refined the craft over centuries. Now that you understand how these beverages are created and what sets them apart, let's look deeper into why they matter. Not just in terms of chemistry, but also in culture, lifestyle, and human connection. Alcohol, in all its forms, has traveled alongside humanity for thousands of years. Each drink, whether it's wine from Mediterranean vineyards, rum born in the Caribbean, or whiskey matured in Scottish highlands, carries a story that ties people to land, tradition, and memory. Think about wine for a moment. Grapes ripen under the sun, absorbing the soil's minerals, the climate's influence, and the farmer's care. When they're crushed and fermented, the final wine becomes more than a beverage. It becomes the essence of a place and a season. Every sip of wine is like tasting the weather of that year, the richness of the earth, the culture of those who harvested it. That's why connoisseurs talk about vintage with such passion. Wine has always symbolized celebration, love, and artistry, which is why it has been praised in poetry and rituals for centuries. Beer, on the other hand, tells a different tale. Often seen as the drink of the common people, Beer is rooted in simplicity and camaraderie. Its creation from barley and other grains is ancient, dating back to early civilizations like Mesopotamia and Egypt. When people gather around a pint today, they're unknowingly partaking in a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. It isn't just about alcohol content. It's about the comfort, the refreshment, and the bond it creates between friends. Spirits, though, elevate things to another level. Distillation didn't just make beverages stronger, it reshaped economies and cultures. Rum, for example, became closely tied to trade routes, the rise of naval empires, and even colonial history. Whiskey has always been linked to resilience and craftsmanship, with each cask aging slowly, drawing character from wooden barrels. Vodka carries the cold traditions of Eastern Europe, while tequila pulses with the fiery soul of Mexico. Gin, with its botanical heart, embodies the creativity of distillers who wanted more than just strength. They wanted identity. The fascinating thing about spirits is not only their variety, but also their versatility. A glass of whiskey might be enjoyed neat, with ice, or blended into cocktails. Vodka disappears seamlessly into mixers, while gin demands to stand out with its herbal bite. Tequila can be bold and fiery, or smooth and sophisticated when it's aged into forms like reposado or añejo. Brandy often carries warmth and depth, making it a drink associated with reflection and luxury. Every bottle has its own story, every glass its own mood. And then there are liqueurs, the playful siblings of the spirit family. These flavored and sweetened creations remind us that alcohol doesn't always have to be sharp or intense. From creamy Irish liqueurs to fruit-infused delights, they bring variety and color to the drinking world. They make cocktails brighter, desserts richer, and evenings more indulgent. Yet, beyond flavor and strength, there's a universal truth about all these drinks. They must be approached with awareness and respect. Alcohol, when consumed responsibly, can be part of celebrations, traditions, and relaxation. But its strength should never be underestimated. The same process that turns grapes into wine or grains into whiskey is also what creates substances capable of clouding judgment, slowing reaction times, and impairing health when abused. It's why understanding ABV, the alcohol by volume percentage, is so important. A beer at 5% feels very different from a spirit at 40%, and recognizing that difference allows people to make conscious choices about what they drink and how much. In today's world, these beverages have also become markers of identity and lifestyle. Some people lean toward the sophistication of wine tasting, where flavor notes are discussed like poetry. Others prefer the simplicity of a cold beer at the end of a long day, a reminder that joy doesn't always have to be complicated. Whiskey enthusiasts dive into discussions about single malts, blends, and the art of barrel aging. Cocktail lovers experiment endlessly with spirits and liqueurs, crafting new experiences with every pour. At the far extreme, there are spirits so powerful they almost defy belief. The 96% ABV of Spiritus Rectificoni, or the 95% of Everclear, isn't something you sip casually. They exist as proof of what distillation can achieve, showing just how concentrated alcohol can become. These aren't drinks to enjoy in the same way you'd enjoy a glass of wine. They serve as stark reminders of alcohol's potency and the fine line between enjoyment and danger. But what's beautiful is that despite their differences in strength, taste, and origin, all these beverages share a common theme: connection. They bring people together. They spark conversations at tables They mark milestones like weddings or anniversaries, and they comfort during quiet evenings of reflection. Alcohol in moderation can be an enhancer of life's moments, making celebrations brighter and memories more vivid. When you hold a glass in your hand, you're not just holding liquid. You're holding centuries of trial and error, of discovery and refinement. Fermentation was once an accidental miracle, when ancient people realized fruit juice left in the sun turned into something new. Distillation was a breakthrough born from curiosity and persistence. Each technique improved over generations until it became an art form. And today, we get to enjoy the result of that human ingenuity. Understanding the differences between beer, wine, whiskey, rum, gin, vodka, tequila, and brandy isn't just trivia. It's a way of appreciating the craftsmanship behind what you're drinking. It's the realization that behind every label, there's a story of farmers, brewers, distillers, and cultures who poured their knowledge into the bottle. So whether you're sipping a glass of wine that tells the story of a vineyard, enjoying a beer that carries the legacy of ancient brewers, or raising a glass of tequila that captures the sun and soil of Mexico, remember this: it's more than just alcohol. It's history, science, culture, and creativity combined. And the choice is always yours. You can embrace the lightness of beer, the elegance of wine, the strength of whiskey, or the botanical crispness of gin. You can explore, discover, and learn what resonates most with you. The key is not just to drink, but to understand, to appreciate, and above all, to enjoy responsibly. Because at the end of the day, alcohol is not only about what it does to you in the moment, but also about what it represents. The traditions of countless generations and the creativity of human hands turning simple sugars into something extraordinary.